Meet me on the 4th, where there is barbecue, but the fireworks don't dance. Okay, maybe we are the fireworks and we dance, but there is no smoke in the sky. I can't celebrate this anthem. Can't wear red, white, and blue together in one outfit. Lend me your stars and I will shine for every state that still can't pronounce my name. Dare me to laugh. Print the American flag on my tongue and then kiss me. Do I taste like freedom to you? Does it make me a hypocrite if I still eat the barbecue? There it is.
Wonderful. Did you eat the barbecue?
This year, I didn't eat the barbecue. Last year, I ate the barbecue. So I think it just shifts every year.
It's baby steps, right?
It is. It is.
I think the bar is constantly changing for us, so.
Absolutely. And I mean, we could get into the politics of this country, but It's always influenced by just like the cultural climate at the time and how patriotic I feel.
Yeah.
And this time around, I didn't feel compelled.
That makes so much sense. I want to talk about that more, but first, let's do an intro. Hello, and welcome to the next episode of It's Your Time to Shine, a podcast about being a mom in a modern world. My name is Juspreet, and I'm so excited to kick off Women's History Month with a contemporary poet, writer, and activist, Aman Kaur Batra. Aman and I are recording live in Ventura, California, and I'm so honored to hear her journey. Hi, Aman.
Hi.
How are you?
I'm very, very happy to be here.
I'm really excited too. And I think we should tell our listeners, first of all, we are meeting face-to-face in beautiful Ventura, California.
Yes.
I have never been here before.
I live in California, and I might argue that I have never been here before.
Wow. Okay, great. So this
Maybe
is like
once or twice.
This is like a new experience for both of us. Okay, so I was in SLO for a few days up by Cal Polytech, and I drove along the coast. The worst thing you can do is put a Texan on the coast of California because I'll probably move into my car and just live on one of these state beaches at some point.
Totally. I totally get it.
So, Aman, I'm so glad we're here together. Aman and I met at a film festival where you actually were performing quite a bit of your poetry as well. And I was just so enamored by your work. I loved how your work spoke to people of multi-generations and multiple backgrounds. Can you tell our listeners a little bit about yourself?
Absolutely. I am a full-time poet. I went to school at UCLA and I got my degree in creative writing. And since then have just been on a journey to make this a full-time career. So I do some teaching artist work. I'm also an activist. And I just work really hard to make my words accessible to people who look like me. First generation, second generation, brown girls who are kind of caught in the middle of two different identities. I call it the hyphen. And that is who I write for. People who find themselves in that hyphen.
That hyphen metaphor is really beautiful because what you're describing, we have never really had anyone put into words what it means to live inside of a hyphen. So I think that's really beautiful.
Thank you.
The first poem that I heard really gave me chills. And I think I had mentioned this to you, that I got tears in my eyes, and then my daughters, who are third generation Americans, Sikh Americans, also had tears in their eyes.
Wow.
And so for them to be able to relate to something that I could relate to, that my mother could relate to, and my grandmother could relate to, is like really profound.
Wow.
Would you be willing to share that poem with us?
Absolutely. So this poem is called Good English. I grew up in Little India, child of Pioneer Boulevard, where every shopkeeper on the block knew my name. For the past 30 years, my family owned a store called Bombay Spices. I remember being 14, sitting behind the register, ringing up a white woman. She said, "Wow, you speak really good English." I smiled, took her money, and replied, "Thank you." What she meant was, I speak my colonizer's tongue better than my mother's. There's ache in that. My mouth is a desert of guilt, shame, privilege. But it got me into college, got me speaking this good English. I am the result of an arranged marriage. My mother's way out of a village trying to quiet her rage. When she came here, my dad's parents feared that she would steal all the money in the cash register, leave my father, and start a life of her own. To gain their trust, she got pregnant. She was 21, living in a country that turned her name into Jessie, her accent a stubborn stain for the cleansing. She balanced ESL classes while running the shop, breastfeeding her child, and learning to drive. I am 6 years old when I correct her English for the first time, and she replies, "Thank you." I rid my mouth of mama, replace it with mom, with eye roll, with if you wanted me to be more like you should have stayed in India. But she didn't want me to be more like her. She wanted me to have everything that was denied to her. She wanted me to have lecture halls and mimosas, boyfriends and nail polish. She wanted me to have a choice in whom I marry, what language I speak, at what age I decide to have a child. In 2016, she took me to India for the first time. Every house in the village knew her name. She, the one that got away, the prize of the people, their praise turning every room she entered into a temple. I am a continuation of my mother. I write to immortalize her sacrifices. I am the product of her defiance, the student of her hustle, proof of her survival. I don't get my anger from her. I am her anger, her amplified rage. To the white woman at the register, forget your good English. Mama and I, we are our own language. Something you can't wrap your tongue around even if you try.
So beautiful.
Thank you very much.
And you can see I'm tearing up. It has that effect on me. It's so wonderful. Tell me a little bit about that.
I had an experience that triggered the moment with this white woman when I was 14. And it was kind of like in this lost archive of memories. And when I remembered it, it bothered me to the point of having to sit down and write it out. And so I started with that image and I started with how that made me feel. And I think at the time, being 14, and there's this white woman and she's like, you speak really good English. And I feel the microaggression, but I don't know how to make sense of it.
Sure.
And so I'm just like, thank you. And now I'm like, no, that's really messed up.
Right.
And obviously, given it had been like a good decade, I came into the piece with a different perspective and a different understanding. And I worked alongside my mom a lot of the time. And so the poem found itself weaving into her story. And I think when I was younger, mom and I had a really tumultuous relationship. And it wasn't until I entered my 20s, like 22, 23, that I really came to understand how much she's sacrificed and how much she's given to me. And I truly transformed from her being someone that I'm ashamed of to my hero, like my superhero. And so that experience and that knowing, that understanding, that love was so transformative that I had to write a poem about it.
First of all, let's talk about the actual experience, because I can relate, and I think so many of our listeners will be able to relate to this idea of someone having these microaggressions towards you and making comments, these passive aggressive notions of letting you know that you fit into the world that they've created.
Right.
And when we're young, we don't understand it. I think our gut, our instinct tells us something's wrong.
Yes.
Right? And that's
absolutely.
why you remember the moment, because when it happened, I'm guessing you were like, this is weird. But we're so young and we're not proficient in the language of culture and identity.
Yes.
To the point where we can stop and articulate what we're feeling and say, no, I don't need your acceptance. Like, are you my English teacher? Who are you to tell me that I have good English, right? Yes. And then I think there's layers of our own guilt. And this is very common in immigrant communities where we tend to start speaking the language of the oppressor, to use your own words. We start to understand the framework and the matrix of how to be successful. And I say successful in air quotes because it's a construct, right, of the world that we're being immersed in.
Right.
And when we excel at it and we do it well and we have our good English, which gets us into college, which gets us a great job, we have basically mastered a skill. Is that really mastery? Like, is that really success? And I think that for me personally, working with the community has given me a lot of insight. So San Antonio doesn't have a large South Asian community. We do have a very large Mexican American population. And we have San Antonians that are of Latino or Latina descent that are Americans. And they're treated as differently. And the system and society is not made for them.
Right.
And when you are engaging with people who are disenfranchised as a community because of their color or because of their name or because of the language that their grandparents spoke, not even the language that they speak, As I've been engaging in that, I realize how the system is corrupt and biased.
Yes.
And I also realize the privilege that I have. Tell me a little bit about your parents. How did they feel about you studying English?
They spent a lot of time trying to mold me into a doctor.
Of course.
Right? Of course. During my adolescence and even as a kid, I was like 6 years old with a stethoscope around my neck and little toy doctor parts saying, I'm going to be a pediatrician.
Nice.
Like very down to like the
specialization. You had it picked out. Yeah.
But I was not that good at science. I am such a right brain creative individual. And so I didn't even excel in the classes that would lead to being a doctor.
Okay.
And so after my first year of trying to take pre-med courses, I was like, I can't do this. And I took a creative writing class. It ended up being my favorite class that semester and pretty much took it from there. I wrote my first poem when my brother was born. I'm 7.5 years older than him, and I was so excited, and I didn't know what to do with that energy, so I put it in a poem.
That's awesome.
And my parents were like, wow, this is really good. You wrote this?
Oh, wow.
And they printed it and they framed it. And so to some level, they championed my writing and they championed my artistic abilities. They just were like, that's a hobby.
Yeah.
That's what you do after school.
Right.
And you might be good at it, but you're going to be a doctor.
Yeah.
And it did take a lot to go against the grain of those expectations because it wasn't just the pressure coming from my parents or my community. It was self-imposed pressure and a self-imposed expectation that I have to be a doctor. And if not that, at least a lawyer or something secure, something that, you know, my parents didn't sacrifice all of this and immigrate here so that I can be unsuccessful.
Right.
And the fear is that you pursue an artistic career and it fails and you're unsuccessful. And how are you going to build that generational, not just wealth, but like a reputation, some kind of grounding, some kind of I belong here without capitalism backing you up to some level. Yeah. And so we have to kind of play this game. And playing the game felt so wrong to me. After graduation, I did go and I get a big girl 9-to-5 corporate job. That job was good until it was keeping me from taking my career to another level.
And pursuing your real dream, which is to perform poetry.
Absolutely. And my real dream is, it's a little surreal sometimes, but it's here.
Yeah.
And I'm doing it.
Yeah. That's so cool.
Yeah.
That's so inspiring.
Thank you.
As you're talking about your parents, I kind of see the similar currents.
Right.
Where they, you know, our parents, like, I feel empathy for them.
Absolutely.
Because they feel that they are setting you up for success, right? To go forward. And I don't know if your parents are like this with you now, because I think times have changed. But when I was your age and I was just graduating college, my parents would always be like, "Vya karla pehla." Like, just get married first. And then you can pursue your dreams.
I get that from my dadima.
Do you?
Right.
Okay.
So my mom is definitely cool with me pursuing my career and having all of my stuff together.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But Dadima is definitely on my case. She will reference different people in the community that I should talk to.
Yeah.
And
who would be good matches?
Good matches. He's an engineer. He's a doctor. A very good match.
Yeah.
Like, I can figure it out.
They're worried about you being alone, right?
Forever.
Yeah. And it's like they don't realize that between Netflix and the internet, it's fine to be alone.
Oh, I'm fine. I prefer it, actually.
Yeah, I'm with you.
I'm a big fan of my own company.
Times have changed, and I was telling my parents for the longest time. I got married. My husband and I got married pretty young, but for my sister who got married a little later, you know, my parents were always like, "Oh, I'm just worried about her." Like, "What are you worried about, Mom?" And she's like, "I'm just worried."
Yep.
Like, okay, what are you worried about, Mom? You know?
Yes.
She's like, "I'm just worried about her. Just, settle ho jave." Like, I just want her to be settled. It's cute and it's innocent, and it's also terrible because it's teaching our young women this stereotype and this idea that we're not able to support ourselves. And I think it actually, like, for those of us who have a good relationship with our parents and we're confident, we think, oh, it's adorable, and we brush it off, like what you're saying about your daddy or what I'm saying about my mom. I'm willing to brush it off because I love her. But if I really look at how the root of a lot of depression and anxiety in young women comes from these comments of,
For sure.
you know, you need to settle down and you need to do this or that. When I think about that, I'm like, guys, knock it off. Like,
Yeah.
you need to stop doing that, you know?
Absolutely. That's patriarchy very much embedded in our tradition
Yes.
and the way that so many people think
Right.
up until this point.
Yeah.
And it takes constant undoing
Right.
and self-reflection and just checking yourself. And
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Very cool. Okay, so what was your first poem that you performed?
my first poem was, I think, a heartbreak poem.
What did your friends think when you did this?
I would
Poet?
say the majority of my friends are writers or poets.
Okay.
I live in Long Beach, and my roommate, I met her at the Poetry Lounge, which is the largest open mic in the nation. I started frequenting the lounge in college it really just started as me in the audience watching people read poems.
Right.
And it's honestly one of the most life-changing and transformational spaces. Really amazing. They get a line literally out the door and down the street every Tuesday. In order to perform, you have to get there very early and put your name on a list.
Okay.
And so there's like kind of a competitive aspect to it too, because there is a slam team that represents the lounge every year.
Okay.
And so that's really how I got involved in poetry, and that's how it generated a career for me, was through the poetry community and through the slam community, which I found at the Poetry Lounge.
There.
And it went well, so I kept coming back. And then I challenged myself to write about the things that make me uncomfortable, which was like the good English piece.
Yes.
I have another piece that is about my hyphenated identity, and it's called Here.
Okay.
And so that became my staple poem that I would perform there a lot. The first time my grandma was given an iPhone, she held it in her hands and she said, "Ekiye." I said, "Dadima, this is an iPhone." And so she continues to inspect it in her hands like a ripening mango, and eventually decides that it tastes good. Turns out her favorite function was Siri, probably because she sounds familiar. Growing up, I got used to hearing the women in my family repeat phrases like, "Sorry, I didn't get that." Or, "It's your opinion that counts." See, there's a reason why the Siri on an iPhone has a woman's voice. She only speaks when spoken to. Just me on a stage is an act of defiance, is a place I am but shouldn't be. When people ask me where I'm from, I respond, "Here." To which they say, "No, but like, where are you from?" "Oh, I'm from here." I am from my mother's silence. I am the hyphen between Indian and American, a border splitting myself in half. In America, I am a foreigner. In India, I am a foreigner. My grandfather was a refugee twice. His survival story folded into the layers of his turban. His 3 sons, terrorists. My mother, the wife of a terrorist, because she is only ever a wife, and my father only ever a terrorist. When people call my family Al-Qaeda, I forfeit my voice to fear. Shut up like they want me to. Tell me, how is this not violence? I am generations of white men forcing their way into my complexion. My hands are flags, waving at the same men who conquered me like a country that never intended to belong to them. And isn't that how I lost my voice in the first place? Because jado main boldi haan, sare mainu nahi samajhte. And just like that, in 16 syllables, I am a stranger. And if you're not supposed to speak to strangers, and I only speak when spoken to, it's no wonder why getting up in front of a mic feels a lot like breaking through my mother's silence. Like the inanimate object in your back pocket finally stopped apologizing. One of Siri's default answers is who I am is not important. I am important. I am a revolution rising from underneath the American dream. I am everything that has tried to silence me. I am a wolf howling at a moon that will never howl back at me, which is to say, this country will not answer my prayer. This country does not speak the language of my God. This country would kill my God because she wears a turban. This country is a place I am, but I'm afraid to be. This poem is proof that I am here. When people ask me where I'm from, I will still respond here. I mean, wasn't Columbus looking for India in the first place? Thank you.
Oh, that's
thank
so
you.
beautiful. I just want to sit here and have you like recite all your poems for me. I think your next book, you need to do an audiobook.
You think so?
Yes.
Okay.
I think that would be amazing.
I've considered it.
Yes. I'm going to say that, I'm going to very forcefully say you need to do an audiobook. And I think there's a couple reasons for it. One is that your voice is beautiful.
Thank you.
Amazing. And the performance, because I read portions of that in your book, and my daughter, I'm going to show you a video of my little one reading it as well.
Oh my gosh.
But your pauses and your inflection, I mean, I have goosebumps just listening to it.
Thank
That's
you
so
very
wonderful.
much. That means a lot.
And I'm so curious. Like, I want to meet your parents too and ask. Now I want to have a second podcast where I get to ask your mom some questions.
Oh, she would love that.
Because I'm like, how can you feel anything but pride?
She is my biggest supporter.
That's awesome.
She really, really is. I know in the beginning it was difficult, and I explained that the expectations were heavy to do anything but poetry, but the more I pursued it, and the more comfortable I became sharing my work with her, the more I let her in on me.
Yeah.
The more she really got to connect with me and who I am and how I really am a continuation of her. And so at this point, yes, she's all about it.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
I'm a mother of 3, and as parents, it's so difficult to raise a child for the first 12 years of their life, holding on to them so tightly, protecting them, you know, kind of Heismaning them, you know. Around the age of 12 or 13, you know, young people start to really spread their wings, and it's a time where they learn who they are. Being able to let go of that while still observing and having our own judgment, even though we try not to have judgment, it's incredibly hard.
Yes.
And I have so much more respect every day that goes on. I have 2 teenagers now. So every day I'm like, man, did I do this to my parents? This delicate balance that our moms have to play, playing the part in their, whether it's a 9-to-5 job, or for my mom, it was an 8-to-8 job. She had to play a part and play a role there, and then come home and do everything at home.
Right. Literally do everything.
Yes. I've never heard her say things that I say, like, man, my feet hurt. So I look at that, and I'm curious for you, like, when you look back and reflect on the life that your mom lived, what are some of the things that stand out to you that are so different from your life?
The first thing that comes to mind is just all the sacrifices that she had to make just to get through the day, just to survive. And I don't have to do that, which is why I always come back to this notion of privilege, and why I feel like there's so much ache in that privilege, because it's bestowed on me because my mom sacrificed so much. So she sacrificed time. In a lot of ways, she sacrificed time with her kids because she was working all the time. And then I actually lived in an extended household. So my grandparents lived with us as well, my dad's parents. Yeah. And so Dadima did a lot of the cooking, and my mom was robbed of having those bonding experiences. Small things like cooking for us. She didn't do that. And in a lot of ways, the household fell on her. It was on her back. And she was what kept everything going. She was the spirit that kept things going. She was, you know, such a hard worker. Worked so hard. And I think I have the liberty of working smart and not hard all the time. Though my life can be laborious, it's because I choose it, not because I have no other option.
Right.
And in her case, she had very little option. I know that if she had a choice in the matter, she would have pursued school. She didn't get to finish school, and she didn't get to, you know, go on and get a master's or further her education. And so now she puts a lot of faith in me to pursue education, academics, things like that. But she has all the strength and power and will to do it herself. And I don't even think that she feels like it's a possibility for her.
Hearing you say that makes me think about how opportunity, some of it is a perception.
Yes.
And I'm sure if you went to your mom today and said, hey, Mom, you could go back to school.
Yes.
And this is true for my mom as well. So I'm not picking on your mom by any means. They would just say, oh, no, I don't need to do that now. My time has passed.
Exactly.
You know?
Exactly.
Which is a little sad.
because I know it would be so fulfilling for her.
Yeah.
And I know she wants it.
Right.
It's just not even in the realm of possibility.
Yeah. And the reason that I think it's a little sad is because I know from personal experience that so much of what shapes our reality is our perception of how we believe we're supposed to fit in society. Our moms were not permitted to even have a midlife crisis.
Right.
And so that's just, I don't know, it's enlightening and terrifying for me to observe that.
Absolutely. Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. What about your extended family? How did they feel about you becoming a poet?
They didn't quite understand it at first. I would hear echoes from people in the community. What is she doing? And sometimes it would really get to me.
Yeah.
And in ways it was linked to other like generational gaps. And at school with my friends, in the settings where I felt very comfortable, I mean, there was nothing wrong in the way I dressed. There was nothing wrong in the way I spoke.
Right.
And they valued my voice. They valued my everything from what I say to how I present myself. And then I would show up to the Gurdwara and then all the aunties are talking about like, oh, she's the troublemaker.
She's the one. Yeah.
Yeah, she's not doing anything by the book.
Yeah.
And so I would hear all of that and it felt discouraging at times. But then I just kind of acknowledged that it's noise and I need to focus on what is fulfilling for me and the fact that I am doing the work for the people in the Gurdwara as well.
Yeah.
You know, I'm doing the work for the young brown girl sitting at the back of the classroom, and I'm doing work for my very specific community.
There's been quite a rise in like what I would call Punjabi and Sikh creatives.
Yes.
What has been your experience in terms of like community members receiving you and their interest?
In a lot of ways, I'm still trying to tap into the Punjabi community and the Sikh community. I focused so long on slam and I was creating work for, I think, just American brown girls for that hyphenated identity, but so many identities fit into that hyphen.
Yes.
And so, I mean, especially where I live, there's a very large Latinx community. I often found myself outside of those circles, but wanting to peer in, like looking through the window and then getting more specific about my story. That's when my community expanded.
Okay.
And so I do have peers that are Punjabi poets. I have peers that are Punjabi artists. And I'm really hoping that as these years unfold, that community expands and that we work together and we collaborate and we all share a vision, you know, and I would love to see more light come from that.
It sounds like your journey took you to mastery first before you tried to really engage in the community. And I think every path is the path, right?
For
is
sure.
the acceptable one. It sounds very noble to hear that you had a passion for the creative arts. And so you like dove in and started going to this poetry lounge and, you know, got up on stage. I'm sure you were nervous. And you fought through that. And I think from a selfish perspective, because I have kids, I'm hoping that you will engage with the community so that people can see more of you and see more about what's possible.
Yes.
Because not only does your poetry serve to really give a voice to people who don't have the courage to speak up or don't have the understanding to understand what they're going through.
Right.
When they're 14 and someone says to them, you speak good English.
Yes.
And to be able to tell that story. But I think there's that second level where you can really make an impact because you are blazing a trail that's a non-traditional trail. And I think some of the other creatives that I've met, they still had a traditional job. For you to kind of be that anchor person that's like, no, you can study this and just do it. It's fine. That's amazing. That's a really great role model to have.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course. Okay, so I want to show you a video of my 10-year-old who really doesn't read.
Okay.
I'm embarrassed to say, she really doesn't read. I caught her in the kitchen one day after you were in San Antonio and we got your book.
The brighter it shines, the darker I get. I am lighter this way. She doesn't understand. At 10, we walk hand in hand through DTLA.
Oh my God, that is the most precious thing I've ever seen.
Yeah, so she stopped reading because she saw that I came up behind her. But the fact that she just on her own picked up the book and started reading,
Started reading it. That's so powerful.
as I've become more mature as a parent and my understanding of like what it takes for a person to develop the confidence to want to read on their own, I've expanded the gates. I'm like, you want to read a comic? You want to read graphic novels? Like, you want to read a magazine?
Right.
What do you want? I will give it to you. So after seeing that, I was so happy because it was poetry and because you're Punjabi.
Oh, I'm seeing.
But then after that, I was like, okay, maybe there's other poetry that you will like. And so I feel like that you helped me crack a little bit of a code with her.
Oh, I love that.
So I'm going to be indebted for you for quite a while now.
And it's just such a full circle fulfilling moment for me because that is what I'm trying to tap into.
Yeah.
That is exactly who I'm trying to inspire.
Oh, so good.
beautiful.
Okay. I'm glad I was able to share that with you. Do you have another poem you want to share with us?
So this is from my chapbook, Stolen Thing.
If our listeners wanted to get a copy of it, where can they get a copy of
They
it?
can get it on my website. So that's amankbatra.com.
Okay.
And there are bits of my poems on Instagram as well. So that's at Aman Kaur Batra.
Okay, awesome. And we'll put a link in the show notes to your information. So if people want to follow you,
Perfect.
they can follow along and see what the trials and tribulations of a Punjabi poetry queen are.
Trials, and there are definitely tribulations.
Yes,
so.
absolutely. So I walked into the library and there is a quote, a Camus quote, and it says, a country is made up of the citizens, something to that effect. And I thought about that, and I thought about the fact that we're like a few feet from the beach in California where you see a lot of people surfing and eating avocado toast and,
Yes, exactly.
living their best life. And then we are in this political climate, which is a stark reality for many of us of color.
Right.
Especially women of color, because I don't believe that there's a candidate for us. And sometimes I have these little moments where I feel like everything, the universe is just making me stop and focus in on a very specific point.
Yeah.
So yes, I agree with you on the patriarchy. I agree with you
Yes.
that the political climate is something to be reckoned with.
It is.
And I also think that there's a tremendous amount of hope amongst the people because
agree.
of women like me and you,
Yes.
who were raised by women like my mom and your mom,
Oh, beautiful.
through such adversity that we can see that there's light at the end of the tunnel, because there's always only been light at the end of the tunnel.
Of course. And we're doing the work, and this is part of the work.
Yes. Having the dialogue and engaging in different ways.
Absolutely. And inspiring younger generations of people to do the same.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You didn't talk about your dad too much.
I didn't.
Yes.
I
Is there
would love
anything-
to talk about my dad.
Okay.
I would. I might get a little bit emotional. My dad actually passed away when I was 17.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't know that. Okay.
That's okay. He was extremely influential in me choosing my artistic career. He was a painter and went to Cal State Long Beach actually for fine arts. And
Oh,
so,
wow.
yeah, I grew up with his like paintings all over the house.
Okay.
And he, at that time, in like the early 2000s, the digital age was just coming up and computers were becoming a thing. And he was one of the first people to really get into that and turn this fine arts passion and skill into graphic design.
Oh, cool.
And so he started working as like a freelance artist, doing a whole bunch of different graphic designs for websites, creating websites, and then worked as a creative director. And so he was a huge creative influence.
Yeah.
And without that, without him fostering my writing and, you know, as a kid, I would also draw and him saying like, oh, this is incredible. Like, you're better than me. And I'm like, I wasn't.
Yeah.
But to hear that from your dad
Yeah.
is kind of all the fuel you need to keep creating.
Yeah.
And for a moment, I was creatively and emotionally stunted after his passing.
Okay.
And without him being this constant validating force in my life, I did steer off a bit. I did then say, okay, well, we're going to go with medical and we're going to do what is expected and convenient and safe.
Right.
But I think that if his presence was in my life between those ages of like 17, 18, 19, he would have fostered my growth as an artist. Yeah. And I carry that with me. I carry it with me every day.
That's so wonderful. And we know, like, the relationship you have with your parents is so important for every child. But to hear that your dad had such a like empowering role in your childhood and really helped build your confidence and then also kind of like create this anchor.
Yes.
Because I really believe, I said that example before, like the ages of 0 to 12, in my mind, create a foundation of how children react to certain things. Some of it's based on personality. I think a lot of it is based on the interactions they have with their parents. And then after that, when they start to spread their wings and recognize and experiment with who they are as individuals, I still believe like the relationships that we have with our parents, they still anchor us.
Yes.
And those anchors, sometimes they weigh us down, just like an anchor does, right? And sometimes they steady us in a storm. And I think that's really beautiful and that's wonderful. Have you written any poems about your dad?
I have, absolutely. My first experiences with poetry were writing about grief.
Okay.
And when I had mentioned I took a creative writing class in college. My first creative writing class, I wrote a poem about losing my dad.
Okay.
And then even in my era of slam, a lot of my work has been centered around grief and around, just his passing and his influence and all of that.
That's amazing. Is there anything you'd want to share?
There is a piece I'm sure I could share. The only time I ever saw my dad cry was when he told me the story of when I was born. I sat on his bed, legs curved into an infinity, and watched his eyes well up with tears. I said, "Oh my God, Dad, are you crying?" And he said, "You're my miracle." At the age of 13, Dad was diagnosed with a rare form of arthritis. By the age of 30, he had 60-year-old bones. He had ruled out having kids, but that same year, he married my mom, and the miracle, with a slight attitude problem, happened. But I was never the miracle. The miracle was Dad using his cane to put on his socks every morning, watching him make pizzadillas for lunch, pick me up from school, take me to the Natural History Museum because I wanted to be a paleontologist. The miracles were his portraits, his collection of pastels and watercolors, the mixed CD he made me for my 8th birthday. The miracle was his faith, his uncut hair, the turban he wore proudly despite the stares. Dad was my best friend, my movie buddy, my Google Maps before Google Maps was a thing. I still remember sitting in his golden Camry making him play Kiss from a Rose by Seal on repeat. It's been 9 years since he died. I lost the mix CD he gave me. I hardly go to the movies, and I don't want to dig up dinosaur bones for a living anymore. When I have a bad day, I still don't know who to call. Sometimes I am an empty museum, a lost map, a broken infinity. I am a rare form of longing, searching for him in the brushstrokes of paintings, in the punchlines of his favorite movies, in the calm of a familiar melody. He is still everywhere, and nowhere at all. There is no flesh to hold on to, no warm cheek, no loud laugh, no dad joke, no National Geographic sent to the front door. But I am left. I am what's left of the buried bone sadness, the fossil remembrance, the desire to dig him out of whatever is left. I am the excavation of his brilliance. I am his chiseled craft, this poem, a growing pit. Sometimes I pretend he is listening. He tells me, "Aman meri jaan, aman mera dil, aman meri khushi." You lost the one person you thought you couldn't live without, and here you are, living like a miracle.
Oh, so beautiful.
Thank you.
Oh, you're such an inspiring artist.
Thank you.
Overwhelmed.
I am very glad that I read that. I actually haven't read it in a very long time.
And I don't know if he's listening, because I haven't figured out the afterlife thing yet.
Right.
But we're all listening, and I think I hope that counts for something.
It absolutely does. And now that many years have passed, I feel compelled and I feel inspired to share him with the world. I think for a while, when I was more in the pits of my grief,
Yes.
I wanted to keep him to myself.
Yeah.
I actually didn't want to share him. It was almost like he's mine and the world doesn't get to know him.
Yeah.
And now I'm more afraid that the world won't.
Thank you for sharing that with us.
Yeah. When I met you in Texas, so the show in Texas was one of my absolute favorites of the spring tour that I was on. And it was actually the final show of a series of performances. And I felt so connected to every single person in that room and just very blessed that it brought community.
Yeah.
Because like I said before, this is the community that I have been searching for and wanting to tap into. And it means a lot that my voice is celebrated.
Thank you so much for sharing all of your poetry and just the narrative about what you've been through. It has been wonderful getting to know you more. You are a gifted and talented artist, and I cannot wait to see what you're going to be doing next.
Yes, this is exactly what inspires me to keep creating and pushing myself outside of my comfort zone so that I can reach your daughter who is reading my poems.
Yes.
It's surreal and it's beautiful, and I feel very, very thankful to be here.
And it's real.
And it's real.
And I heard the compliment about Texas Sangeet being super quality, even though we're small in numbers. Take that, California and Toronto.
Honestly, so heartwarming.
Yes.
And I carry that with me.
I hope that you also carry the spirit that we're all cheering for you. And as always, thanks for listening.